Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Geo Trip. It's me, Liaika, and welcome back to our favorite co-host, Dr. Prince. Dr. Prince, thanks for joining us again, but especially Yesenia Arroyo, thanks for joining us today as our main guest. Yesenia, initially a college dropout, Yesenia Arroyo, she returned to the University of Florida to complete a bachelor's degree in geology in 2021. Their non-traditional academic trajectory has allowed them to work in various places like the Orlando Science Center and Kennedy Space Center. As a result, Yesenia is passionate about science communication and very vocal about their shortcomings, hoping to destigmatize the conversation around failure in academia and create space for those with similar non-linear paths. They believe science is for everyone, folks just need the right guide. Yesenia is currently the program manager for GeoSPACE, an accessible planetary geology and volcanology field course. In their spare time, they like to shoot things with lasers, use computerized knife blades to cut paper and vinyl, or vinyl, depending on where you're from, and DJ. Wiki Wiki, Yesenia, welcome to the Geo Trip. We're so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I really love the little scratch. Wiki Wiki. That was fantastic.
I too had aspirations of being a DJ, but we'll talk about that later. Let's get into the main point today, which is getting our audience familiar with the amazing scientists you are and your really fun story. So here at the Geo Trip, we always like to start with your geo story, your geo history. If you will, can you share yours with our audience members?
Sure. I guess going back, I think geo for me has always been tied to planetary. I've been saying that I want to be an astronaut for as long as I can remember. So, and I just re-met someone from elementary school that confirmed that for me, because he was like, oh man, you were talking about space for the longest, and here you are. I didn't know how to navigate the college system. So when I graduated from high school, I actually did not go immediately to college. I ended up at a trade school where I completed a power plant aviation maintenance program. And then I transferred up to UCF, and I was actually an aerospace engineering major first, mostly because astronaut was the thing that was pushing me to, continue my academic journey. And I thought, aerospace engineering was the thing that I had to do in order to become an astronaut. And then at that point is where I applied for a NASA internship at Kennedy Space Center on a whim. I was like, yeah, why not? I had only completed one semester at UCF. And I was like, you know what? The worst they can say is no. Ended up at Kennedy, was doing aerospace engineering, hated it. Oh my goodness. And then I think a mentor talked to me about doing physics. So I came back to UCF to finish up physics. And at some point in there, a lot of things went wrong that I will save because, too long didn't read, right? And I actually ended up flunking out of UCF. And I didn't want to go back to UCF. So after I completed program here at a local community college, I found that UF offered geology, which I think was more in my field. I always said I wanted to learn more about the planets and the things that made them tick and the things that made them different. And geology is exactly that, right? Learning this language to be able to read the history of Earth and other planets and the rocks. And it was online, so I didn't have to move from Orlando, completed it, bada bing, bada boom, here I am. And now I found volcanology, oh my gosh, which is amazing because it's GeoSPACE. So yeah, I'm really sorry. That was kind of long, but that's my geo story.
That was perfect, actually. But they say life is always better in Miami, right? How much of an influence, if any, did growing up there have on your eventual decision to become a geologist, a geoscientist?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think it had any influence on my academic trajectory. It's really amazing when I look back on what I studied when I was in school in Miami. And I think most of it, a lot of the things we focused on was hurricanes, right? Because we were very hurricane prone area right on the edge of Florida there. And it was interesting to me that we had the Everglades so close. And that was something that we never studied or had any field trips to. I think I learned more about the state doing my bachelor's at UF than I did the entire time living in Miami. Like, I didn't even know that our water comes from an aquifer. And these are all things that I learned in high school. So it was really interesting. I think it didn't really have any kind of effect on it. Maybe I had a teacher in school that I think talked about space to me as a kid, and it maybe really made an impression. I think I hyper focused on it, and I've just loved it ever since. But that could have happened anywhere, not specifically Miami. It does have a lot of influence on my identity, though, which I think maybe we'll get into in a little bit.
And Yesenia, thank you so much for your responses so far. And like Kyron said, no need to apologize. They're perfect. I love your candidness. And I think that's one of the things that's about to make this conversation so interesting, because a lot of the times we really avoid talking about the failures, or as someone told me recently, to call it the valleys in our academic journey. And I feel like sometimes our field is so forgiving because every valley is a redirection of sort. So can we talk a little bit about that, your non-traditional academic journey? So you've now gotten to the University of Florida, you're getting this bachelor's. How are you deciding Yesenia the astronaut is going to be Yesenia the volcanologist? Or are they different? Are they even different people?
I don't think they're, well, yes, I guess they are different people. And sometimes when I think back on how closed I have been, like, I tried really hard to figure out what steps I needed to follow and then execute those steps. And I think that made it all that much harder when the plan, didn't work out. So I could see these things kind of like slipping from my hands. Like, when I was at UCF, I went through some issues like domestically, and I was houseless for a while. So I was like on a friend's couch for a bit while I was trying to figure that out, and still going to school. And I think I was really, really down on myself because I had set this plan for myself to do this degree, to get aerospace engineering under my belt, to go to NASA, and then having to pull out of this internship program because my GPA got too low, because I couldn't do it all myself, because I couldn't figure it out. So I think the person that I am now would have never thought, like, I would have never thought those years ago that I would be doing geology or even looking at volcanology as a major. And I think something that I have really learned from these valleys, which I love that I'm keeping that, by the way, I'm using that forever, that is that, just like you said, it's just a redirection to where I'm supposed to be. So I'm a lot better now about accepting these zigzags, is what I call it a lot, that come along, because leaving yourself open to the opportunity, I mean, that can lead you to places that you never imagined. And it's not really a failure if you're not planning step to step to step, if you just let the things come as they come. So it's definitely a different person, but always for the better.
I love that response so much, especially as someone who gets really fixated on the final destination and kind of misses enjoying the journey. I think just going with the zigs and zags, it saves you so much heartache and anxiety along the way. I guess I feel a little like I'm trying to fit you in a neat category, but what would you say you consider yourself at present? Are you a geoscientist, planetary geologist, volcanologist, or something different altogether?
It's funny that you say that you're struggling with that, because so am I. I think I'm calling, well, first of all, just to be able to call myself a scientist, like that was rough, y'all. I think because I've completed my schooling during the pandemic and it was online, and I didn't have any fieldwork experience, like all of those things added to me. I didn't feel like I was a scientist. Like, I felt like I just had a paper that I graduated with, but I I didn't feel comfortable calling myself a scientist, first of all. So, coming to terms with that was, ugh. So now I think I say I'm a geologist by trade because that's what I got my degree in. That's what my background is in. And I think maybe I'm getting close to feeling comfortable calling myself a planetary geologist once I start studying that a little bit more. And then I think the next step after that is planetary volcanologist. I mean, I think maybe I could call myself that now. I've done some work in Hawaii and with the field course now. I think just listen, y'all, the imposter syndrome is real. I have to buy 2 seats whenever I go to a conference because the imposter's usually sitting right next to me the whole way there. But I guess planetary volcanologist, I have a label I think that will fit no matter what stage of my career in, and that's science communicator. I think for as long as I can remember, I've always been super passionate about telling people what I'm learning, about explaining things that I think is really cool that I learned in class or I read in a textbook, and about making science accessible for people of all ages. So I think you can use that one. That's a good label, science communicator.
And might I add, extraordinaire. So you've been really active in so many different areas in terms of your science communication and scientific outreach. Tell us about how you've kind of used science communication to find community within the geosciences.
Well, I think maybe part of my science communication is about being my whole self on Twitter. And I believe that my tweeting led me to Black and Geoscience. I wish I could remember how I met the Black and Geoscience Twitter account.
Can I chime in and tell you?
Yes, tell me.
Yesenia literally volunteered us by her tweeting, which was awesome because she was retweeting, introducing herself, saying, "Yay, community." She was so hype through her tweets, so charismatic through Twitter that she literally signed up to live tweet our very first Black in Geoscience and has been live tweeting and hosting panels ever since then.
Hey, okay, so that's great because I was like, I'm pretty sure it was. I knew I had to have been doing some type of tweeting, and that's how I found the Black and Geoscience page. But yeah, I think part of my science communication is definitely social media, and I try to be open about the things that we're going to get around to today, and have already talked about imposter syndrome and doing things not in a line because that's just been me. And I think tackling the imposter syndrome that comes with that. So I've always tried to be very vocal about that on my Twitter account. And I think other than that, I think I do a lot of I'm not as active now, but I did used to post videos on YouTube. I have a couple up on my channel now that there's a graham cracker plate tectonics video that's pretty popular with the kids. So yeah, I think there's been a lot of social media to or the YouTube stuff didn't really lead to community, but the Twitter, like academic Twitter, y'all know it's lit. So I think there is where I was able to find other folks in geoscience that look like me. I think something that I didn't realize, and it might have been possibly because I'm online, is how there was no diversity really in my department at my university. I think Black and Geoscience, kind of brought that to the forefront for me. And, racial identity, all that stuff aside, I think doing university online and trying to find connections online, people just don't connect the same way, which is really interesting. I'm talking about through Canvas, people just don't connect the same way. But then you use an online service like Twitter, and I have found all these people that I'm like, oh my gosh, look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing. So it's really interesting how both of those are online. And I tried to find community through hey, we're students and we're studying the same thing. And that didn't really work out for me versus I came on Twitter and you see because oh, boom, this person. Yeah, we come on, live tweet for us. So that's been really interesting. But I don't know if I answered your question because I know we were talking about science communication. I kind of just went on a zag there. I'm sorry about that.
we will zig and we will zag. I think that's the theme of today's podcast.
Great.
But I was gonna say, but you did answer our question, and you really reminded us how influential Twitter was, especially during the pandemic, in terms of a lot of us finding community. Honestly, the Geo Trip, and Kyron chime in if I'm wrong, but the Geo Trip kind of birthed through the pandemic via Twitter, Black in Geoscience, and other YouTube links where we're like, man, we love this feeling. We want to be able to continue it post pandemic. We want to provide spaces where people who look like us, align with us, or are focused on helping create equitable spaces in science for people of us where they can be amplified and have a platform to share the great work that they're doing when they might not have necessarily always been looked to share that. So, this is why you're here. This is why you have an extra seat, which you don't need, because there should be no more imposter syndrome. You are a scientist. You have a thought value. And so, we're zigging and zagging with you today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Twitter, I don't know, like that first Black in Geoscience experience for me, I think it rivals or is right up there with, let me be honest, it was probably one of the times that I felt most connected to my geoscience community, like straight up. And you wouldn't think that just talking to people on social media would do that. But yeah, I think we all can appreciate how kind of isolated it feels sometimes to be a person of color and a minority in geoscience. So yeah, Black in Geoscience Week, cherish it. Yeah. And thanks for ruining Twitter, Elon.
Oh my goodness. Can I just speak on that real quick before you move off? Because I thought of something.
Yeah, let's
with the community, because I was like, one of the things that I realized also, like when I was on Canvas, posting my discussion, post my assignments or whatever, is for me, there was always a really big aspect of like, how does this affect people and communities? Like anything that we were talking about, I always liked to bring it back to like a human aspect. And it was what I would get no responses on, like, I feel, Liaka has mentioned, like, I feel like I come through a lot in my writing. So I'm really passionate about this stuff when I'm writing about it. And it was like so disheartening to see folks like that just didn't touch anything for them. Like, we talk about climate change and I would love to bring it back to like, climate change is happening now. These are places that are already being affected. Look at these people. Another big one for me was writing about mining and mining towns and how that contributes to like missing and murdered Indigenous women, and just posting about all this stuff in class and just watching people like not worry about that. And then moving over to Twitter and seeing so many conversations centered on specifically that, how geoscience is affecting like people in the world. And I'm telling y'all, hook, line, and sinker. Y'all gonna see me every year.
So several things. Bear with me, audience. Bear with me, Kyron and Yesenia. Several things. Yesenia, I'm so glad you said that, because look out for my slow burn dissertation, Landscape and Community Heterogeneity, where I explore linkages in geoscience between sedimentology, fluvial geomorphology, and community, right?
Yes.
How community shapes the landscape and how the landscapes impacted community development and continuation. And I have to say, hats off to Big, our very first Big during the pandemic, and all the other Bigs that I've been a part of, and also the Twitter space, because it was within this time I found my voice as a geoscientist, or as an interdisciplinary geoscientist, and found the strength to say, listen, I am not a classical sedimentologist. I enjoy the field, but this is what I want to do. This is how I want to integrate it. Because, I went from Canvas, nobody really caring when I'm talking about people and science, to going to Twitter and finding all these dynamic voices. Shout out Dr. Raquel Bryant. Shout out Akila Kwan, who's also an upcoming guest on the podcast. Shout out Kyron, Dr. Hendrada Ali, and so many more. And so that's why, another shameless plug, Big is so essential, because what Big does is, and what Big is meant to be, and what Big is going as the dust settles and people are starting now to no longer, quote unquote, feel ashamed of the inequities in geoscience or starting to act like it's no longer a problem. What Big hopes to do is be a virtual space, a virtual platform where we can continue to support, amplify, and connect underrepresented groups in science, making scholarship awareness, making academic awareness, something you kind of talked about at the beginning of the podcast, Yesenia, helping our students who are first gen navigate the college system, the ivory tower, and all the unspoken rules. And I mean, this kind of brings me, so if y'all are bearing with me on my segue, this brings me to asking you to tell us a little bit about your exciting role in GeoSPACE, another virtual platform type of program.
Yeah, so I came on to GeoSPACE as a research assistant after I graduated in 2022. And since then, I have moved into this program manager role with GeoSPACE. So if you haven't heard of GeoSPACE yet, like if you don't follow me, because there's no way you haven't heard of it if you don't follow me on Twitter, but it's a program that is built on the idea that field courses can and should be accessible and inclusive. So we have an in-person portion that we run out of Flagstaff, Arizona. So there's the San Francisco Volcanic Field that we study in person, but we also offer a virtual component. So if you're a student with disabilities or a non-traditional student, like if you're a caretaker, you have a child, you can't leave your house for 2 weeks to do something in the field, then we offer a virtual component that works together with the in-person component so that you're, able to learn maybe, not exactly the same things, because, obviously there's some things that we cannot recreate with you being in person, but you learn like how to use like remote sensing software. And I think just teamwork in general, right? Like I think a lot of school today, especially if you're an online student, is very individual. So kind of learning to work with a team of people to come up with a project. Now, for the in-person component, so it's not like, what we don't want is for y'all to think that like, oh, if you're disabled, you can't just come in person, like the virtual is for you. Like, no, we would also want you to come in person. And we try to make accommodations based off of whatever you want to disclose. So we've had people that come out that, have mobility issues, that use wheelchairs to move around. We have folks that have like chronic illness and chronic fatigue, or maybe they're hard of hearing or deaf. And we try to move the course around to fit these things instead of you feeling like you have to change in order to do any field work. You guys talked a lot, like a lot of the things that y'all talked about, y'all had an episode called Field Tripping, I think, that a lot of the stuff that y'all talked about there is exactly what we're trying to address in the field course. It's challenging, I'm not going to lie. A lot of the stuff that like my research is focused around right now is geoscience ed, which is actually another thing that I didn't realize that I was into until I started working with GeoSPACE, but trying to figure out how to maintain a community when you have, half of your cohort in person and half virtual. There's a lot of things that y'all talked about, like, the bonding that you do around a fire that is like hard to replicate. Like those bonds are sometimes hard to try to, figure out for virtual and in-person folks, but we're trying to do what we can with that. But yeah, so we go out every year and roll around the Flagstaff, look at some volcanoes. I have some video that I could probably show y'all because we set up a really cool network this year where we had some folks hike to the top of a volcano and then we set up a base at the bottom and we were able to stream video, crystal clear video from the top to the bottom so that both sets of students could talk about what they were seeing at like the top of the cinder cone and the lava flow at the bottom. It's really cool.
It does sound really cool, actually. So can you tell us how you got involved? So community kind of looks different, right? What does community mean to you?
I guess like in this aspect, like especially with a field course, when I think about community is maybe like there being like virtual students not feeling like they are not a part of it. Like, obviously there's going to be a component of distance. Like there's going to be times where you're working on your own. So of course, like you're not going to feel maybe like you're a part of the group then. But I think what I'm focusing on at least is making sure that everybody feels like they're valued, like everybody's doing work that feels important. Like we don't want any person on the course, even if they're in person or virtual, to feel like they're doing any type of busy work. Like I've read some papers about trying to do like similar setups where like the in-person students, they feel like, oh, well, we're just here to carry cameras for the people who can't see. And then I've also read from some of the students, even from our first go around, that, you know, they didn't feel like they were a part of the whole group because, or they felt like an afterthought because we would change meeting times on the fly, and then that wouldn't give them enough time to meet with us in person. So I think a really important part of it to me is just feeling like everybody's accommodations are cared for and that everybody is doing work that feels valuable to them. I use Discord as our communication tool, and I think it's been working really well for that because, you know, with Discord, you can access it through a browser or through a mobile phone or through a laptop, like you can get a desktop app. And so I think that allows people to stay connected throughout the day. So just them being able to talk to each other, I feel like has built a sense of community for us on these field courses that, I mean, it's just amazing. Like you're watching people joking and sharing memes, even though they're not in person, and like really valuing those connections when they leave. But yeah, it's just been really interesting watching that evolve. We had two really different groups for the first year and the last year. I think like we've learned a lot. So our grant was only for 2 years. Now we're looking for a new one to fund GeoSPACE for, you know, I think we found one that maybe would fund the program for another 5 years. And yeah, we're hoping to just, you know, keep getting better at what we're doing. Cause like I said, there's some misses where there are things like virtually that we don't see because we're part of the group that's on the ground. But I think, you know, it's necessary. And what we're trying to do, like, and by far, we're not the only ones, of course, but what we're trying to do is necessary and important. So, you know, we go out there and we do it.
So I'm getting on my segue here, like Riaika, so bear with me. So, you know, you talk about you have these two groups, they're part of one community, but sometimes they feel a little bit separate. I want to go back to, you know, these other communities that you're a part of, right? So you're a first generation, the child of, you know, an immigrant parent and also a Latinx person. How have you kind of juggled being a part of these different communities?
I think for me, it always, it's okay. Maybe at the end of this, somebody's going to be like, girl, you have to go to therapy because I think for me, it always comes back to, I feel like I'm not actually a part of the group. Like we were talking earlier, I had to do a lot of self-work on understanding my identities because I spent so much time as a child being told like my family's from the Dominican Republic. I feel like that probably speaks volumes to anybody that knows about us. But for anybody that doesn't, we are famous online for saying, you know, I know black, I'm Dominican. So, and, you know, but you're looking at somebody who's like their phenotype is like, okay, what are you talking about? So I think I had to spend a lot of time unlearning a lot of things within myself to be able to see that, yes, I'm a Black person, but, you know, like that's my race. But I have culturally some things that might be different, that's where my Latin culture comes in. But then, you know, I say that it's not really that different. Like how many other members of the diaspora are eating plantains? You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of stuff that culturally, like, I'm pretty sure I'll describe my grandma to y'all and you will have an auntie or a grandma that's exactly the same. So, you know, as much as we want to like put up these barriers that like divide us based off of what we look like or because of somebody else telling us like what we look like, I don't know, learning all the things that were different, but then also learning all the things that are the same really helped me find a place of peace in myself that like, I feel very comfortable saying like, yes, I'm a part of this group. but I'm also a part of this group. And those experiences, like one is not over the other. It's just like a mix. You know what? More zigzagging. I see this is going to be the theme of the, the episode today. I see my zigs and my zags into like Black and culture and into Latin culture, and all of it just comes together to make me. And just being comfortable with that. It took a while to get there, reading a lot of books, reading threads on Twitter, which I think is going to be another theme, from other like Afro-Dominican people and Afro-Latin people, to kind of like unlearn the craziness that a lot of people don't understand about themselves, and then finding somewhere where I'm comfortable with that. And honestly, it hasn't really, it does kind of inform the way that I communicate with other people. And, sometimes like I have to stop and think about like what's too much, especially in like academic spaces. But I think it really, like, coming to peace with that really helps me speak to other people on like issues that they're facing, like whether it's coming to terms with disability. Because listen, let me tell y'all, that's another segue you're probably going to. But I think it has really helped me talk through that with students, because something I didn't expect to find in this program manager role is that I'm kind of a mentor, even though some of these students are academically older than me. Like some of them are already in PhD programs and stuff like that. I have a lot more life experience, I think, than a lot of these folks. And that kind of helps me talk them through some of their issues. So I think that's where it shows up for me, at least in GeoSPACE.
Byron typically pulls the theme and then comes up with the artwork sometimes. So I cannot wait to see what the zigzag looks like.
Yeah.
I'm kind of chuckling internally. But in the spirit of zigzagging, kind of want to touch on some of the things you said, maybe an answer or two back with regards to accessibility in fieldwork. And the reason I want to touch on it is because that field tripping episode and a couple of upcoming episodes, you're going to hear us really talking about or focusing on accessibility in fieldwork. And I would love to hear what was like one of your big takeaways from being in the GeoSPACE space, no pun intended this time, where you're trying to work with, accommodate, and manage different accessibility issues and groups, right? Because we sometimes think about accessibility as one thing, especially if we function in like an able-bodied space or cognitive space. But then when we're actually putting on these programs, building these programs, we learn so much more that we didn't necessarily think about or have the foresight for. So what was one of your biggest learns or takeaways?
I think my biggest one is that accessibility is not like, you shouldn't focus on just like physical disabilities. I think that has been the biggest thing. Like the definition of accessibility is broad and covers a lot of things. So like sometimes accessibility for GeoSPACE looks like buying access mats so that it's easier for someone in a wheelchair to navigate through a sandy area, right? Or to have like somewhere solid to put their wheelchair on while they're out looking at a computer or whatever. But sometimes accessibility means that we provide a stipend for students to be able to go out on a field course. Because, you think about all these traditional field courses, money is a big aspect of it. You have to pay to go on the course. You have to pay for equipment that you might not necessarily have. You have to pay to get there. And that can be a real barrier to access to the field. So, GeoSPACE really takes into consideration like all of those aspects of accessibility. And so like for us, we might ask you what your dietary restrictions are, but then we also give you a stipend to buy equipment, and we also pay for your flight to get out. Sometimes accessibility looks like building in intentional bathroom breaks, that you're not out in the field like 12 hours a day, but that you have breaks where you can actually go and use an actual restroom. And sometimes accessibility means developing a virtual program that leaves you enough time during the day to take care of what you got to take care of, but that you can also participate. So I think that's been my biggest takeaway. Like, we think about accessibility, and definitely as an abled person, my first thing that like my brain went to was like, oh, what if someone is like on crutches or something? But that's not all that accessibility is. So learning that I think has really reframed a lot of what I think about when I'm talking about these aspects now, and I'm thinking about what it means to be accessible for all students. And I mean, even invisible disabilities, right? Like people have people, i.e., someone like me, who maybe doesn't know that they have ADHD, and they're like learning that now and what that means for them, and teaching folks how to advocate for themselves. So yeah, accessible, not just physical disabilities, but making field work something that anybody can participate in is a big aspect of GeoSPACE.
Thank you so much for letting me take you there, Yesenia. The reason I really wanted to kind of push for you to say that was because I wanted to highlight how sometimes we overlook what accessibility is, or we frame it in one light when there's so much intersectionality regarding the topic of what being accessible and not accessible, especially in the geoscience spaces. And a lot of this lack of understanding or lack of appreciation is also contributes to why it's so hard to destigmatize failure or non-traditional tracks, because there are many people who are like, well, just pay for this field course, not realizing that we're not all on the same spectrum, or someone who may look like an able-bodied person is suffering with chronic illness or non-visual disabilities that they don't want to have to explain or, be vulnerable about every time. So I really appreciate you letting me take you there and talk a little bit more about what you've learned and what GeoSPACE kind of thinks about. Because if we are really trying to create this inclusive space, we kind of need to take every aspect as we meet it into consideration. I don't know what it is.
Exactly.
So Yesenia, we've zigged and we've zagged. What future zags? What does the future look like for Yesenia?
I got enrolled in a short course that's going to help me write a GRFP application. I honestly did not think that I wanted to pursue a PhD. And I think, coming back to that, like sometimes I have a closed mindset that I'm like, well, a PhD means I got to be a professor and I got to be in this academia thing. And I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't want to teach, like, at least not formally in a formal space. So I thought, maybe the PhD wasn't for me. But I have been talking a lot to Aisha Morris, who is a Black planetary volcanologist. I was so amazed to find that at the big meetup at GSA last year. So very grateful for that. And she was like, she's like, I've been talking to you long enough to know, like, maybe you need to think about a PhD. Like, you could do this. You should apply for the GRFP. And, me, imposter syndrome, I was like, who do I think I am applying for a PhD program and all that? But I think, yes, when I stopped thinking so much about it being a decision about whether or not I'm going to go back to school or whether I'm going to get a job, and thought about a PhD being the job, I think that really kind of like settled it for me. So yeah, I'm working on a GRFP. I just submitted an abstract for GSA. So I'll be in the geoscience ed, I think session 38. I'll probably post that again on my Twitter account. So y'all come and check me out. I think I applied for an oral presentation though, so maybe it might not be a poster, but I'll let y'all know. But yeah, so, and then I think, like I mentioned, we are looking to see if we can find another grant that we could write a proposal for that will let us fund GeoSPACE for a couple more years. Because this year in 23 was the first year that we've only run 2 years, but this second year we ran the course for credit. So now I think we have more availability for students to come in from other universities. And we get this a lot. Actually, people reach out to us with like, oh, here's a student that couldn't complete their field work because they asked for this accommodation and someone said no, or they said that they couldn't accommodate it. And we're a lot of folks' like last shot at being able to graduate on time or being able to graduate at all. So we ran it for credit this year. And I think, we're working on that aspect a little bit so that folks from many universities can come over and take it as their field credits, maybe take it more than once if they have to fulfill like a 6-credit field course activity. So look out for that. We're hoping we find something that will fund us so that we can continue to run a similar program for the years to come. So
I think after you develop those skills from that grant writing, you're definitely going to get that funding. I have faith in you because Yesenia, you definitely keep me inspired. I also want to shout out another person who keeps me inspired that you mentioned, Dr. Aisha Morris.
Yes.
Yes. And about that PhD track, Yesenia, do it. I myself have had to have many pep talks from the community. I'm on a slow burn, but you know what? We're going to cross this stage and we're going to be doctors together. So
yes. Oh, I love that. And I think what you said like really inspired me because I think I'm kind of getting into that now. Like as I'm thinking about what I want to pursue, like project wise in this PhD, I really want to talk about like our role as people of color in planetary sciences, because y'all, when you walk into these planetary spaces, like it's, y'all know like hex codes, like for colors, is very, hashtag FFFFFF when you walk into.
Oh my God.
Walk into these rooms, y'all, it's really crazy. Cause like I'll come from the Black and Geoscience meetup and I'll be like, oh yeah, like it's great. I met so many people. But I think like more folks are in like, I don't know how to describe it, like what word I'm looking for here. Like they're in the sciences that are on Earth, I guess. Like, folks are into mining and climate change. And I feel like I find more people of color in those fields than in planetary. I mean, because, there's the Black in physics group, but when we look at like Black in planetary science, like with geoscience, I don't really see a lot of folks. So I'm telling y'all, when Dr. Morris was like, oh, planetary volcanologist, I was like, oh, ma'am, we need to speak. Please wait, please. Because at that point, I had not found anybody else yet. But yeah, oh, sorry. See, I went on a tangent. My bad. The point was, I'm really invested in what it means like for us to have a role in planetary sciences. And I think I want that to be a part of what I study or a chapter in my dissertation or something. That and like ethics. We really have to think about decolonizing space exploration because y'all, like the way that we're still working off of these extractive like ideas to get to other planetary bodies. Like I have this idea for an abstract that I want to write that's like connecting Afrofuturism to space exploration. Like I think we can really use the principles and themes in Afrofuturism as a way to guide space exploration. I'm gonna leave it right there. But I think that's something that I want to tie into my dissertation. If I find a professor out there that'll help me like develop that.
I promise not to take us on a tangent. Clearly you're not a fan of SpaceX after saying that, but off air, definitely want to drop some names for you who kind of work with that geo ed, technical science and community research, human resource, just to let you know that, of course, you can do a PhD surrounding the topic, and there are great resources out there. Some of them we've actually had as guests. Some of them are upcoming guests. So this is all part of the building community. And before I even close off and take us to hot potato, I think Dr. Prince is trying to say something, so I'll let him in.
Oh, no. I was just like, yeah, that's a dissertation that I would definitely read.
Oh, cool.
I mean, honestly, not to toot our own horns, but the way that we are trying to carve, or the way that we are carving, because we're not trying, the way that we are carving space and creating these niche intersectional topics, some really exciting dissertations are coming out over the next 5 to 10 years. I am ready for it.
Yes.
And here's like a geo trip thing, right? Like, do you realize that we're referencing other episodes? Like we've gone fully meta now.
And this episode is a wild recording.
Yeah, it's my brain. I'm sorry,
but
y'all.
You know what? This is part of building the community, right? This is how we begin referencing people who are not traditionally or scientists or geologists or geoscientists, whatever label you like to put in for yourself here. This is how we get our H indexes up, right? We start referencing the work that's being done that's overlooked. We're saying the names that people are saying are too hard to pronounce and making them familiar. And so this is what this is about. And with that, before we all get like lost, I am going to wrap us into hot potato. So Yesenia, I know you've been listening to a lot of our episodes. You were quoting some of them. You're doing better than me, actually. So you know where we're at. We believe in balance. And aside from all the amazing technical stuff you shared today, the vulnerability, the stigmas you're working through, and the community you're building, we want to share a little bit about who Yesenia is with the audience.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome to Hot Potato.
Woo!
First question. Are we calling it, after today, are we calling it Twitter or are we calling it X?
X. I'm already working on removing X from my phone because I don't want to see this X on my phone. So Twitter all day, every day.
Mama called you Twitter, I'm going to call you Twitter.
Exactly.
Elon screws it up again. Okay, so question number 2. If your life had a theme song, what song would it be?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to go with, oh no, it's a house song by Carrie Chandler. Oh no, I'm going to just go with, oh, this is killing me. I'm going to go with You're in My System, Carrie Chandler. Y'all check that out. That's a Black Detroit DJ. I'm saying Detroit. I don't actually know he's from Detroit. He might be from Chicago. Oh my gosh. I'm embarrassing myself. Stop talking.
You know what? However, let me save you on the rebound here. You've inspired us because we're actually building the website right now. We're going to start doing a playlist by GeoTrip. So every song our guests give us, we're going to add to this playlist. So we're going to learn this music.
No. Oh, listen, y'all let me know. Because if there's anything outside of space I'm excited about, is house music. We can talk. That's another whole. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Girl, you're gonna come back for another episode, Yesenia. Don't worry about it.
or 2 or 3, it's fine.
Once you start that PhD, we have to hear what that research is about and share with the audience.
Yes. Okay. It's a date. It's a plan.
But third question, hot potato, plantains or cassava?
Plantains all day, every day. I mean, you can have them mashed, you can have them fried, you can have them fried with a sweet. That's a versatile vegetable right there. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I eat plantains with everything.
I feel like plantains should be on the diaspora flag, you know?
Yes. I remember my first Dominican Independence Day parade in DR and watching people put antennas in the plantains and pretend that they were talking on cell phones. I was like, wow, my people were here.
Ooh, wow.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we kind of crazy. Yeah, we a little bit.
Question number 4, right? Which city? Miami or Orlando?
Oh, dang, this is actually a hard Miami. Yeah, it's just Orlando sometimes is a little dry up here. Not like literally because it rains every day, but you know, my culture, my people, like I know where everybody's at in Miami. So I'm not gonna lie, Orlando feels more like home now because I've been here for as long as I have, and my grandparents are not in Miami as much anymore. But like every time I go to Miami, it's like a homecoming. I know where to get the food. I hear the music playing from 2 houses down. It's fantastic. So Miami.
Yesenia, if you get us on the ban list, we're gonna have some problems.
No.
But last question. It's a little controversial.
Uh-oh.
Biggest colonizer, SpaceX or Titan submersible?
Oh, I love this. Oh, the level of spicy here. SpaceX. Listen, the plans that Elon Musk got, I have no trust in him. I'm gonna tell y'all, like I thought Elon Musk, I had bought into the hype. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be our generation's Tony Stark, man, gonna save the world. We're gonna really be in the future now. And all he's done is get himself a little right-wing militia on Twitter when he's supposed to be saving the world. I know that all of his plans for Mars have nothing to do with have everything to do with capitalism and nothing to do with like learning about our universe. So it's definitely going to be SpaceX. It's really unfortunate. I mean, not the engineers. Shout out to the engineers. But Elon,
oh my God. We're going to need liability insurance.
I don't know. People have said worse thing about him on Twitter. They be flaming him every day on there. So I feel like, you know.
We still use Twitter to promote our episodes. So, Dr. Prince, you're going to need to close us out before we need liability insurance.
My bad, y'all.
We have zigged and we have zagged. We've got rid of the second seat for our imposters, and we've made space for persons of all abilities. We've gone high, we've gone low. Not as low as the Boring Company, but there's still room. But thank you, Yesenia, for your candor and for taking the time to share your story with us. Listeners, on behalf of my one and only co-host and myself, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Geo Trip. We'll be back next month with another exciting installment. But until then, you can follow us on Twitter. Yeah, we're sticking with that. At the Geo Trip podcast for as long as Elon keeps the lights on.
Perfect. We also forgot to say, Yesenia, let our listeners know where they can find you.
Oh, okay. I have a website that's under construction right now, but I promise it will be up soon. So that's Sen Arroyo, SEN Arroyo.com. I'm also on Twitter at _Vivid Dreams. I might be moving over to Instagram since Elon is tripping. It's the same handle. Or if you're feeling like you really want to get close, I'm on Discord with the same handle. You can find me on there.
All right. And we'll see you next time. Another exciting episode of the Geo Trip. Until then, take care of yourselves and you'll hear from us soon.
Peace.
Peace.